The only reason I feel led to get up in your business is because God has a way of getting all up in my business. And so you get to experience all the fun that I get to experience. It is fun sometimes. I'm going to be careful what I say, because I feel like when I'm saying this stuff, God's listening to me, and I don't want to give him any more ideas than he already has about how to train me. Never mind. Moving on. All right, so the series we're doing is called Who is God? And this is a question. We talked in length about it last week. And I think that modern Christianity, North American Christianity, whatever, evangelicalism, whatever label you want to throw at it, I think we have gotten into a habit of not really running after this question like I think would help us. I think that to some degree we kind of think we figured out who God is and we figured out enough, and now we just kind of have to just journey forward with that information. And for me, I think we can never stop asking this question. If God is as big as he truly is, and if he is infinite, like we talked about last week, in my mind, in my viewpoint, we can never stop asking this question. We can never stop trying to search who God is. We can never stop going another step. There's so much more to the Lord than we could ever imagine. And so last week we talked a lot about who is God and why that question's important. And we talked about God being infinite, and that his infiniteness is expressed both with how close he is, with how immanent he is around us in every way, and both with how transcendent he is, that he is within and without and all over and everywhere. He's unlimited. Another great way to say that. And we talked about how oftentimes it would be easier to serve a limited God because the what we would need to do would be real clear. But with an unlimited God, it's so overwhelming sometimes how much love, how much joy, how much grace, how much mercy. Because we live in a very limited human world. So limits, we understand them. Limits on time, limits on whatever it is. Energy. Anybody have limited energy in their lives sometimes? Come on now. I get it. Naps. This is why we love naps. Who loves naps? Yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you. I'm trying to teach my children to love naps, and they just resist. I'm like, we need to get some naps going on in here. I love naps. And serving an unlimited God has so many implications, and you can listen to last week's message, and we didn't get so super deep in it, but it was good. So listen to that. And today, we're talking about God is intimate. Say intimate. Ooh, that was rough. Let's say it one more time. God is intimate. Say intimate. Yes. There we go. I like it. Intimate. Now, intimacy is a super fun topic, right? For everybody. All of us involved. We love talking about things like intimacy. And what is intimacy? When I'm talking about intimacy, this is not a marriage sermon, so don't start sweating if your kids are in here. Don't worry. Not that. We're not talking about that kind of intimacy, even though a lot of what I say will probably ring somewhat true if you have a relationship that you share that type of intimacy in. But again, we're not talking about just that. We're talking about intimacy in the sense of a physical closeness, a physical connection, and we're talking about intimacy from more of an emotional closeness. I know this is going to be a fun topic today, isn't it? We love this type of stuff. I don't, but that's okay. But I feel like this is such an important aspect of God for us to understand. I think that when we're asking this question of who is God, understanding that God is intimate, understanding how close he really is, that he's not as far away as we think. Modern life today tends to view God as somewhere out there or up there. We tend to put distance between ourselves and him. We tend to create space that separates us from God. Some theology even deeply teaches that we are totally separate from God, and he cannot be in the presence of us because of how filthy we are. So he has to remain wholly separate and apart from every aspect of us. You can see intimacy as a need from the moment you are born. Babies need a closeness. They need to be touched. They need to have that nearness. They need to have a connection. They cry for it. Kids cry to be close to mom. They cry out for intimacy. From the moment you were born, you had a need for this closeness. And as you grew, once as a baby realizes that every time it cries, it doesn't get what it wants, right? Although hopefully, there are some people I meet that I'm not sure that they've learned that lesson just yet. They still seem to be able to stand in a Walmart and yell real loud and hope that everybody will respond to their need right that second, okay? I'm not picking on Walmart, sorry. Any store, really, that can happen. And seems to be particularly happen a lot in Walmart. But, who knows? I digress. But babies learn intimacy. They learn that just crying isn't always going to get it. And as we grow, right, we go through all these different transitions and we understand closeness and relational closeness. And as we age and as we journey and as we become into adulthood, we tend to pick up a lot of ways that we cope. Right? Kids have to learn to cope with the fact that their mother is not always going to be there every second of their life. They have to cope with the fact that when they cry, they're not going to always get what they want. So they find ways of coping. It's normal. That's part of life, right? Some of those coping mechanisms are healthy, and some of those coping mechanisms are not. So we battle and grapple with intimacy from the moment we're born. When we talk about intimacy, I think of how you know people so well, right? That's kind of where my mind always goes. Like you have a relationship with certain people that's very intimate. Like you know them very well, you're close to them physically. Maybe it's a romantic relationship, maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's a child, maybe it's a parent. There's a closeness. Not only are you together, but there's an emotional connection. You feel that connection when you're with them. Oftentimes, I feel like in relationships like this, you end up with nicknames, right? And that's kind of when we watch Jesus in the Bible, he had a nickname for God. He didn't just call him Lord or Jehovah, or he called him Abba, which means like daddy. And so we when we're intimate with somebody, we can get to that point where we almost have our own language that we speak to each other. My wife has a nickname. It's Care Bear, right? I call her Care Bear. I have a little Care Bear tattoo on my ring finger. Aw. Why didn't you all say, aw? Do you not like this? What's wrong with you? Just kidding. Yeah. Thank you. But I call her Care Bear or Bear for short because, right, we have that relationship. Now, if some random person comes up and starts calling her Care Bear, it's kind of awkward because it's like, do you even know who she is, right? Like that's not, it's just kind of weird. So sometimes nicknames like that, like they have sort of an intimate side to them. They have a closeness. There's more of a relationship there. And when we talk about intimacy, it's obvious that we're not called to be intimate with every single person in the world. Thank God I don't have energy. I don't have enough for that. We can be friends, but not be intimate, right? You can have a relationship, but you don't necessarily have to have that emotional closeness or that physical connection. And that's healthy. That's good. God is not asking you to have intimate relationship with every person that you find in life, right? Hopefully we're all aware of that. Now, this is very uncomfortable to talk about in America. North Americans historically we struggle with this area of intimacy. We know this because many, many, many people feel very alone. In a society that's full of busyness and things are moving really fast and we're surrounded by people, it's amazing how alone we can still feel. It's amazing how we can say things like, nobody really knows who I am. We can live a whole life and never fully be able to 100% be ourselves in front of anybody else on the planet. We can have all kinds of acquaintances and friendships, but there's this sort of side of us that we never share with anybody else. They don't know that this is who I really am. It's amazing how we can have all these connections and all this space for relationship, but still feel so alone. Alone. I would say that I think that has more to do with this intimacy thing we have or don't have than it does with whether or not we know how to be close to somebody or emotionally close to somebody. And so if we're built with this, And we start out life with this need for intimacy, and we start out life with this need for closeness. Why is it that we hold back? Well, I think so often in today's culture, and I can maybe just only speak from my experience, I think so often I hold back from intimacy because I believe that dealing with the disappointment of an unspoken need is a lot easier than dealing with the disappointment of a spoken need that isn't met. I'll say that again. I oftentimes don't share a need because I believe that it'll be easier if I just deal with my disappointment of not having that need met, if I've never said anything about it, than if I go to somebody and say, hey, I need a friendship, or I need something, or I need a closeness, and then I don't get that, that disappointment would crush me so much that I'd rather just not say anything about it. Now, that may not be everybody's experience, but I do know disappointment is a strong, strong barrier to intimacy. Shame is another strong barrier to intimacy. When we feel like there's something wrong with us, not that we did something wrong, not that we made a wrong choice or we made a mistake or our decisions didn't go well, but that there's literally something wrong with who I am. That's a huge barrier to intimacy, because if I were to reveal that part of me, that vulnerability, and then to feel that rejection of somebody going, ooh, what's wrong with you? That'd be really hard to deal with. Now, Jesus says this really important phrase in Matthew at the end of all of his talking, at the end of all of everything he's done, and he's about to depart from the disciples, these guys that he led for a few years, and they were very intimate, very close, and there was some that he was even closer with, but he said this statement to them, and I think sometimes it gets kind of lost, because you know how sometimes in a verse in the Bible there's like so much, and then you just kind of read past it because it's just like another thing in there. But at the very end, in Matthew 28:20, he says this little statement. He says, I will always be with you, or I will be with you always. And so I want to stand on this verse when it comes to this idea of God is intimate. I want this to sort of settle into our hearts that he is always with us. Always. Always. Now, for some of us, that might bring a feeling of peace or relief. For some of us, that might feel a little creepy. Like, God, can I have some space, right? If you're with me always, are you in the bathroom while I'm scrolling on my phone? What's going on, God? I need some privacy, right? Or it might be a little creepy in the fact that because of what decisions or how I'm living my life currently, I don't really want God to be a part of it. Because if he were to really see what I was or who I was or how I was, he would probably not be happy. So you can see why with those types of feelings, that type of vibe, we can see why we would want to push God further and further and further away from the areas closest to us, right? Because if God's always with me and God's this perfect, infinite, complicated being and he's always around, then if I'm not perfect, then he's not going to want to be around me. And so sometimes I just need space. And yeah, I'm not in a great place right now, but maybe at some point him and I will be back together again. So we'll just sort of separate for a season and I'll just kind of live my life. And hopefully this will be an important part of it again. Now that's not everybody's experience again, but oftentimes I feel like we do that both in a real purposeful way, and we also do it sort of just subconsciously. We just kind of forget about God for a while we're going about our life. Or we leave God out of certain aspects of our lives. So Matthew 28:20, Jesus says this thing, I will be with you always. What does an intimate God look like? An intimate God looks like one who is willing to be by your side. And I would go even one step further, because a side-by-side relationship is different than a face-to-face relationship. A side-by-side relationship, you can be going in the same direction and you can be doing a lot together, but it doesn't ever really turn towards each other to really address who we are. God is not a side-by-side or a I've got your back kind of God. He is a face-to-face kind of God. He wants to look into your eyes. He wants to see all of the parts of you, whether you're proud of them or ashamed of them. And he's not looking because he wants to find fault. He's not looking because he wants to see what's wrong so he can fix it. He's looking because he's fascinated. Because you're it. His intimacy is reserved for us and us alone. It's not surprising that with our culture today that sometimes we feel more intimate with a pet than we do a person. God is not interested in the pet as much as he is you. He wants a face-to-face and eye-to-eye relationship with you. He wants that closeness with you. An intimate God also looks like the one that shares a dinner with you from across the table, or sits on the couch next to you and watches Netflix, or the God that hangs out with you while you're just doing whatever in the backyard or on your job. This is the kind of God that we serve. He wants an intimate, close connection, a personal relationship, one that is face-to-face, one that his presence is right next to you. An intimate God looks like that reassuring presence when we're at our darkest hour, when things aren't going well, when we're in the midst of grief or sorrow or pain, that God is there, that hand on our shoulder, that arm around us saying, hey, I'm here. I think sometimes even God knows we don't need him to answer it. We just need him to be there. We just need his presence beside us. So often the most intimate relationships you have, you don't need them to solve all your problems. You just want them to be with you. You just want them to be near. You just want them to share in your life. Sometimes I think intimacy comes across even in listening. You ever been with a person that really listens to you? Like, maybe you don't have this experience, but there are certain people that are really, really, really good at listening to you. I'm probably not one of those all the time, and I'm sorry if you've ever felt like you were talking to me and I was zoned out. That's my bad. I'll try harder next time. You get good. You learn how to maintain eye contact while you're thinking about something else. You're just like, yeah, yep. And then it gets quiet, and you realize they asked you a question. You're like, what was that? What'd you say? But there are those people that you have that conversation with, and they're really hearing you, and they're really wanting you to pour out. Like, that is such an intimate moment sometimes, and that's our God. That's who he is. He wants to have that face-to-face, that closeness with us. Now, intimacy is not love, and love is not intimacy. Those things can be two different. You can love somebody and never have an intimate relationship with them, right? You can feel a feeling of love, but never really be close to somebody. It happens all the time. Intimacy tends to be the first part of building a real relationship of love, and love tends to lead to some form of intimacy, but they're not necessarily the same thing. Just because you're in love doesn't mean you're just naturally going to have intimacy. Now, I'm going to stand up here and I'm going to talk a lot about intimacy, and I'm going to have to give you a disclaimer. I am no expert. This is probably one of the most difficult areas for me to truly relate to God. It is not easy. I don't naturally relate to God in an intimate way. I would prefer him to be more of a far-off God that just comes down every now and then, and we have sort of a back and forth, and then if he's good, then I'll be good. And then when we need each other, we'll get back together again. Like, that would be a really convenient God relationship for me. Right? I'd just show up with what I've got, and he'd show up with what he's got, and we'd share, and it'd be great. Then he'd leave, and I'd leave, and it'd be good, right? Like, when he wants to access areas of my heart that I don't want him to have access to, that's when I don't want an intimate relationship with him anymore. When he wants to deal with things in my heart or issues I have, and I've been hurt before, or I've failed before, or I've messed up before, that's an area I don't want him to be close to me during. When I look at decisions I've made or mistakes I've made, and this baggage that kind of follows you around in life of things you've done, I don't want him intimate in that area. That's not my best stuff, God. Let me hand you my best stuff next time. Let me show you the report card where I got all A+, not the one where I got the other letters. I struggle with an intimate relationship with God. I've had to make deliberate decisions and choices along the way to lean into him in an intimate way. And I still don't do great at it. But I can't not, when we're asking this question, who is God? I cannot get away from the fact that he is intimate and wants intimacy with us. To me, it's one of the most important characteristics of who he is. Some of you, intimacy becomes so easy to you, you found yourself over the years being taken advantage of over and over and over and over again because you've trusted so easily that people tend to take that trust and use it against you. Everybody doing good? Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're taking notes, write this down. Control can look and feel like intimacy. But control destroys. It uses fear and power to destroy. And you might think, well, what are you talking about? Let me explain this to you. So remember when I talked about as a child, you start to learn coping mechanisms, and as you venture and journey into adulthood, you've learned how to deal with the fact that, not everybody is there for you when you need them, and you've had to learn how to, manage your own life, and some of those are very healthy, and some of them are unhealthy. Over time, sometimes we've been hurt. So many people have hurt us, so we started to close off areas of our heart or close off areas of our lives or close off parts of our journey because we've been hurt in this area, and I don't want to expose this to anybody anymore. And so we've started to sort of build walls. We make coping mechanisms, and then we start to set limits on how far people can get or how close people can get to us or how close God can get to us. We start to create barriers and a structure and a fortress around us to protect ourselves because we've been wounded and hurt. Not all of that is bad. Sometimes we have to learn the hard way that people don't have our best interest in mind. But when that happens enough in life, and it happens enough in our history, and it happens enough to us, it starts to become such a habit that we do it naturally with God as well. And control becomes an important part of our lives. And sometimes it can even look and feel like intimacy. Think about it from a parenting perspective. When kids are young enough that you can keep them under your power, and you can help make decisions for what they say, what they do, how they behave, and they have to sort of do what you want, you can control the relationship enough that it sort of feels like we're close. But then the moment that child suddenly is out from under your power and is able to make their own decisions and is able to live their life, we learn how close the relationship really is. We see whether it's intimacy or not. This may have happened to you as a child with your parent. It may have happened to you in a relationship where control and fear and power have sort of become more of the relationship than actual intimacy. Control uses our past, our shame against us. It weaponizes mistakes that we've made. Remember when you did this? Sometimes control doesn't even have to speak about the past mistake. As long as it knows and I know, then I'll just let my life be controlled because I don't want to feel that shame again. I don't want to feel that fear again. Control uses manipulation and bending the truth to get what it needs. It uses hard lines of threats or threats of rejection to force a response. And it uses our past decisions, failures, shame to restrict and direct. Both from other people and we even do this in our own lives. We want to control who has access to us. We want to control who's close to us. We want to control whether a person really knows us or not. And then yet at the same time, we desperately long to be known. We desperately long to be seen. We desperately long to be loved. But sometimes we view it as it has to all kind of be on my terms. And so we live out relationships in more of a controlling manner. Now, you can always see control when it's real aggressive, but it's a lot harder to see passive control, right? It's a lot harder to see the rolling of the eyes. It's a lot harder to see the things that we've chosen to believe about the other person or about God or about ourselves that we just sort of live out. We all know when somebody gets real quiet, doesn't want to address anything, doesn't want to bring up anything. Oftentimes, this fake form of intimacy can fill needs for moments, but it does not create. It destroys. Eventually, the relationship will fall apart. Some of us have experienced that in life. Some of us are experiencing it right now. And oftentimes, because we build these coping mechanisms and we live with them, it becomes our relationship with God. Now, intimacy does the opposite. Intimacy creates. It creates through forgiveness and peace. Intimacy breathes truth into relationships. Not truth in the sense of, hey, you're dumb. Not that kind of truth. When I say intimacy breathes truth, that kind of truth is a full acceptance of the human condition. When someone's intimate, they fully accept who you are in the condition you are, as you are, all the strings attached, all the baggage coming along with you, all the coping mechanisms, all the past shame, all the guilt, all the sorrow, all the disappointments, and it accepts it and says, yes, I want all of that. I'll take it all. We long to be accepted in that fashion. We long to just be who we are. In intimacy, it doesn't need to manipulate or twist or lie. It just breathes truth. Intimacy uses tenderness to pave a way forward. Where control uses shame and hardness and rejection to push people, tenderness paves a way and says, if you want to go that direction, I'll be glad to go with you. Intimacy disarms. All the violent response of weaponized control where we take our past and our mistake and our decision, or people take them and use them against us, intimacy does the opposite. It disarms all those things. It takes all the weapons, takes all the violence out of our hands. Doesn't need to be right. Doesn't need to come out on top. You can see these two forces have been at work in our lives for a very long time. From parents and their children, married couples, dating couples, even in workplaces where people work closely together, intimacy and control are kind of always fighting for a balance. Everybody doing okay? Even some branches of religion have created a God who is more controlling than intimate. They've created and promoted a God that is more interested in fixing all of your past, more interested in weaponizing what you've done wrong, more interested in creating a hard line of rejection of what's in and what's out, more interested in that tough love, more interested in that pushing you into, whether you want it or not, this is what's best for you. Religions have used even the Bible and have twisted and manipulated it and kind of created their own form of what God is supposed to look like or who he is. And they have failed. They have failed in giving us and showing us and helping us understand that God is not a controlling God. We failed when we asked that question and we didn't seek harder for an answer, because he's an intimate God. A God that wants truth in the form of full acceptance of who you are. The Bible says that Jesus came to earth and died for you, yet while you were still who you were. The Bible tells us all kinds of things about how we were chosen before the foundations of the world, how we were knitted together in our parents' womb. It gives us all these imagery of how God fully, truthfully loves and accepts us as we are. And through a path of tenderness, shows us the way forward. And doesn't weaponize our past to teach us, to hurt us, to control us, or direct us, but disarms and says, your past, I already forgot it. I already forgot it. Intimacy. So intimacy boils down to trust. And nobody comes to the discussion about trust empty-handed. We all have very strong feelings about what trust means. We know how it feels when trust is misused, betrayed, or withheld. Your perspective on trust is very real and very informed by a lifetime of decisions, mistakes, relationships, successes, failures, hopes, dreams, pain, broken relationships, successful relationships. Sometimes these conclusions are helpful and sometimes they're not. They hold us hostage. They control us. Now, there's a big difference between trust in a casual relationship than in a really important relationship, right? Like the trust I have with my wife is a whole lot different than the trust I have with an employee at Walmart, okay? I'm not going to hold them hostage, right? Like I don't trust everybody. Like if I don't know you that well, I'm not going to put all this trust in you. Now, I could still get really frustrated when you fail me, whether that's right or wrong. I think I was talking to Carrie on it. I was like, sometimes I think we expect way too much out of like people that are serving us food. Like when I go to a restaurant and sit down and someone's literally making my food, bringing it to me, setting it in front of my face so I can eat it, then cleans up after me. Doesn't it seem like when we get angry at them for getting something or making a mistake, or maybe they're just a little busy and we sort of berate them or get upset with them, aren't we kind of asking like a little much? Like, aren't you putting a little bit more trust in, like, they're making your food. Go home and make your meal if you don't like it. Anyway, that's a rant for another day. So the difference between trust in casual relationships and high-level relationships, I think you all understand that. High trust takes years of commitment to build. If you've been dating for a month and think that you have a high trust or a high intimacy in your relationship, guess what? You're wrong. You're wrong. Now, I'm convinced in most relationships that real trust doesn't even become an issue until in the relationship there's been a broken trust. Because if someone's never wronged you, how do you truly trust them? Aren't you just sort of waiting until the day they wrong you and then suddenly now your trust is put on the line? I'm convinced that real trust begins oftentimes in a place of brokenness. Real trust oftentimes comes from a place of a vulnerability. I think so often we expect human beings to be so perfect, but then we give ourselves a tremendous amount of grace to make mistakes. Here's a big thought for you to write down today or to think about. Take it home and marinate on it. Because intimacy really boils down to trust. And here's a thought. Trust is given, not earned. Trust is given, not earned. This is where people usually start to squirm a little bit. It makes me squirm inside. Earning trust, to me, is one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves as we journey, as we live, as we relate. Earned trust comes with this keeping score element. When we say someone needs to earn our trust or somebody broke our trust and now they've got to earn it, then what we're really saying is, I'm going to start keeping score of your rights and wrongs, and until you somehow tip the scale in the favor of rights over wrongs, I'm not going to trust you. Sounds like it would work on the surface, right? But can you see the threads of control that are in that? Can you see where you're still sort of holding them hostage? Especially because oftentimes that scorekeeping system is only in your mind, but in nobody else's. So they're playing a game with you that you're the only one that knows how to win. You got to earn my trust. Imagine if we had to earn God's trust. Imagine when it came to things like grace and forgiveness and mercy, we had to earn his trust in order to get that. Would any of us got it? Would any of us have earned it? When it comes to the kingdom, when it comes to Jesus, you say, well, that's different. That's not earning trust. Well, yeah, God's trusting us with a pretty big message. God's trusting us with a pretty big thing. God's trusting us with some real big issues, and most of us never earned it when he gave it to us in the first place, and we still haven't earned it where we're at today. Trust is something that you choose to give. You choose to give to people that you're close to. You choose to give out to those in your life that you're seeking this intimate relationship with, or it's an important relationship in your life. Trust that you give out is so risky. It's risky to trust, especially if you've been hurt a bunch of times. And yes, I'm not saying that just because I'm not trying to communicate that you should just trust everybody. There are people that you probably shouldn't be giving your trust to. But if you're asking them to earn it, you already sentenced them to never really being trusted again. Trust begins with forgiveness. When you require something to earn your trust, you're fighting a losing battle that neither of you can win. The Bible tells us that love doesn't keep a record of rights and wrongs. But yet you would substitute the word trust in there. So many of us keep a very long list of rights and wrongs. And we have no problem keeping those against people. And if trust is the foundation of intimacy, if we really look at intimacy as being the foundation of trust, how important is it in a relationship of love then? Pretty important. So if our love and trust and intimacy all sort of journey together on the same path, doesn't it seem like it'd be important that we understand giving trust over asking someone to earn our trust? When we ask someone to earn our trust, we have to record their faults. We have to keep score. As parents, we'll often tell our children when they fail that they're going to have to earn our trust again. You're going to have to earn my trust again. Sometimes I wonder if we focused more on, as parents, am I presenting trust to them? Where's my consistency when it comes to trust? Where's my record of right and wrong when it comes to trust? Am I expecting them to earn something that I myself would never live up to anyway? Sometimes I think if we asked ourselves that question more often, our kids maybe would understand a greater level of trust and intimacy with us. Is that a perfect view of it? Of course not. It's complicated, messy, and very risky. Does that mean I'm probably going to get hurt? Probably. You probably are. Does that mean I'm going to put my trust out there and someone's going to misuse it? They might. Does that mean that I should just give my trust to everybody I meet in life? Absolutely not. But if you want an intimate relationship and you want a high trust with someone, you're going to have to risk it and you're going to have to give it and not expect them to earn it. You see, I think so often when it comes to intimacy, we're so fearful of being hurt again. We're so fearful of giving out that trust again. We're so fearful of taking that next step of what the blowback might be or what pain I might have to get. And we have this like whole shadow side of ourselves that sort of lives and exists and kind of journeys with us. And that shadow side of us, that those coping mechanisms that wrestle with fear and power and control and pain and grief. Oftentimes we live in a sort of negative state where we don't want to address anything. We don't want to really confront anything. We don't want to have any eye-to-eye, face-to-face relationships because they're too hard. We always sort of are suspicious or paranoid about what everybody's doing or what they're thinking or saying. We have this like unhealthy coping mechanism with our food or our drinking or our addictions or whatever it might be, spending money. We have lots of energy for all this stuff except for these relationships that matter most to us. We seem to have inexhaustive energy in our job, but we have so little time and energy for the people we love. to me, this intimacy with people and intimacy with God sort of go hand in hand. I don't think they can be one and the other, that I can have great intimate relationships with people, but then my intimacy with God is nowhere to be found, and vice versa. Oftentimes, how we express love, trust with God is also how we express it with people. When intimacy is successful, it creates peace. When we're experiencing intimacy, it creates peace. Now, not peace in the sense that it's a momentary feeling of everything's okay. Not peace in the sense of I'm no longer fighting. But peace in the sense of a reality of peace. That no matter what happens, it's like that verse that we love to quote, Philippians, and I say this all the time because I really want you to get it. Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, is about you being able to endure whatever comes your way. And if you live in a state of control when it comes to your relationship with God and fear and power and all these other things, when there's never going to be a reality of peace around you. You may be able to force moments of peace. You may be able to manufacture a feeling of peace, but there will not be a reality of peace. Because intimacy is the thing that creates the reality of peace. This poet named David White has this great statement that he made. The antidote to exhaustion is wholeheartedness. We so often look at exhausted things as needing rest. We so often look at relationships where we don't have time as we just need to get away. We so often look at places where we're seeking intimacy and think that if we just had more time or more energy, that we could get it then. This manifests itself when we take our families on vacation, hoping that by going away somewhere, we'll feel close or we'll feel connected or we'll feel some kind of connection there. And yeah, that can happen, right? But we can go on family vacations and not have any intimacy if we don't have our whole heart in our family. And it can feel exhausting to be at a place where you work, or it can feel exhausting to be in a relationship that if your whole heart is not in it, there's no intimacy there, there's no peace there. And this is where I think the beauty of our relationship with God becomes just so absolutely profound, because God is not a God who just wants intimacy on Sunday morning. God is not a God who just wants intimacy when you're feeling okay about everything in your life. God is a God that is with you always. Always. In John 14:27, Jesus says, I leave the gift of peace with you, my peace. Not the kind of fragile peace given by the world, but by my perfect peace. Don't yield to fear or be troubled in your hearts. Instead, be courageous. Intimacy is knowing, seeing, loving, built upon the foundation of trust. You can self-sabotage it. You can allow disappointment to rob you. You can take trauma and you can have trauma and abuse become a barrier to it. You can allow your shame to direct and control and keep people away. And you can live a life and never truly be 100% you with anybody. But your God, wherever you're at right now in this moment, wants intimacy with you, wants closeness with you, wants to build a life of peace, not a moment of peace, a reality of peace. Peace in a relationship that clings together can forego any disaster. It's a peace that creates a foundation for relationships of honesty, creativity, birth, life, ideas, so much more. And in our trust and the giving of our trust is where it starts and ends. John 16:32, this is from the Message, says, I'm not abandoned. The Father is with me. I've told you all this so that trusting me, you will be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace. Oh man, I think so many of us are exhausted and looking for intimacy. And we're looking for it in all different locations, and here it is, right next to us, right in front of us, always. And if we can wholeheartedly give our trust to God, not want Him to earn it, not want Him to have to show us, not want Him to have to check off whatever list it is, but literally just, I know you've been hurt. I've been hurt. I know people have failed you. People have failed me. I know it's risky to one more time, but man, that reality of peace, that creation of life, that intimacy, only intimacy can really bring. I want that peace. I want that wholeheartedness. I want it with the Lord, and I want it with the people around me. And I know if I can't get one, I'm not getting the other. If I can't figure out intimacy with God, I'm probably not going to figure out intimacy with people. If I can't figure out intimacy around me with people, I probably don't have a clue about intimacy with God. So where does it start? Intimacy starts with forgiveness and repentance. Trust starts with forgiveness and repentance. I can't tell you enough how many times I've got to come back again to the table of forgiveness and say, okay, God, yes, people have hurt me. Yes, you've hurt me. Now, forgiveness towards God sometimes looks more like repentance because we don't always understand what God is doing or why. But it's not hard to be hurt by God. If you've ever prayed for something and that hasn't happened, if you've been sick or a child's been sick and God didn't seem to come through, if it seems like God could have prevented something from happening to you and He didn't, it's not hard to be hurt by Him. Oftentimes, forgiveness, intimacy starts with us letting God off the hook and not asking Him to earn our trust, but giving it to Him. Understanding that it takes time and understanding that the reward is so good and so sweet. A peace that goes beyond all understanding. A peace that is creative. The reward of intimacy is that feeling of being 100% known and seen and loved. That no matter what happens in life, I've got this God who stands face to face with me, looks right in my eyes, and trusts me as I trust Him. That was willing to give His life for me. That was willing to lay it all on the line, even though I may never. That expresses this incredible love. Not just once for all time, but every moment of my life. He is with us always. You don't ever have to be alone again. You don't ever have to experience this life without someone fully knowing who you are. Your God in heaven longs for that relationship with you. It's not far. It's not a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through. It's one more time giving Him your trust and saying, okay, God, I'll trust you. Let's bow our heads where we're at. Let me just pray. Lord, we're all on this journey together, and I believe we all want this intimacy. Maybe we want it with you. Maybe we just want it in our lives somewhere. Maybe we just want a feeling of connectedness. I don't know, but I believe every single one of us is at a place right now where we could take a step closer to you. Or we could become more aware of how close you really are to us. And so, God, I'm asking that you would help all of us. Help us see, even me, where we're not trusting. Help us see where we've chosen not to forgive. Help us see where we've allowed the fortress of our coping mechanisms to keep people away from us, or we've allowed these things to take root in our lives. Help us to see how in our relationships we've leaned on control more than on love and intimacy. Help us to see where we've tried to use power to get what we want instead of giving out of who we are. Help us to embrace, God, that you're not so far away. You're right here. You're not turning away from us in shame, but you're turning towards us. You're not the father that runs and hides because his kids aren't doing what he thought they should do. You're the father that runs right into the mess your kids are making. And instead of correcting them, you join right in with them, Lord. You grab their hand and you turn them towards you and say, I love you. And God, let us trust you even further today. Let us trust you with every part of who we are. Let your tenderness, God, as you express it to us, take residence in our heart, that we might embrace who you are. Papa, Abba, Dad. We long for intimacy, God. And you are an intimate God. I just feel at peace right now. I don't know about you guys, but I just feel at peace. You don't always need to rush to the next thing. You don't always need to sprint to get ahead. You don't always need to climb over everything and everybody to get where you need to go. He's here right now. He's here with you. And he loves you. He cherishes every moment with you. His eyes constantly find themselves looking at you. His mouth can't help but smile when he glances in your direction. And even though you might hold him at bay, he doesn't hesitate to wrap his arms around you. He doesn't hesitate to come right into your world. He doesn't hesitate to come and be with you. Because he loves us and he loves you. Jesus. Amen. Whew. I don't know about you, but I got something in that moment. That was good. I wasn't trying to do anything there. It just sort of happened. So no matter where you're going, where you're headed, this afternoon, today, tomorrow, this week, God's going with you, and he's with you all the way. And so let's embrace this idea. Let's open up our hearts to an even greater degree of what it means to have an intimate God that is always with you. Amen? Amen. Hope you guys have a great Sunday. Have a great week. We'll see you here next week. Love you guys. Thank you.